Or good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. And today's guest here is Erin Cowling. So, Erin, maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself and give a background of all the fascinating and really exceptional things you've been doing, as well as talking about your blog as well.
Sure. So I can start in the present and talk about everything I'm doing now, and then maybe further on in the conversation we could talk about how I got here. So I am a freelance lawyer and the founder and president of Flex Legal Network, Inc. A freelance lawyer, we practice law in a little bit of a different way. We only work for other lawyers and law firms. So instead of working for only one law firm, we freelance for multiple law firms or sole practitioners. So that means we don't take on end clients. What we call them are the general public who might hire a lawyer to help them sue or get a divorce or whatever. We don't work with them. We work with a lawyer or law firm who all of a sudden has a little too much work on their plate, and they, instead of hiring a full-time associate to come on board, they reach out to us, we pop in, and we help with whatever the project is. So my background is in litigation. So I would help with drafting a factum or trial prep or pre-COVID going to court for a quick motion for these lawyers. We at Flex Legal, we have lawyers who practice in all different areas of law, from criminal law to estate litigation, family law, general, corporate, commercial litigation, civil litigation. Most of our work is focused about 80% in litigation, and then the other 20% is corporate based. So corporate drafting, M&A, transactions, shareholder agreements, that kind of thing. We also have freelance law clerks and paralegals with our network as well, which we brought on a couple of years ago. So that's one of the things. I wear two hats with Flex Legal. I practice as a freelance lawyer, but I also run the company. Originally it was kind of 50-50, but as the business grew, it's now more 75-25. It's a lot of work to kind of grow a business, and I've really enjoyed learning that. I have a couple other roles on the side too. I'm the regional alumni advisor for the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law. So that's my law school that I went to. And the dean, the current dean, Dean Dodick, Adam Dodick, wanted someone on the ground here in Toronto to kind of assist alumni. A lot of people would graduate from U of O Law, come back to Toronto, and then they didn't really have any connection or people to assist. So I help lawyers in their first 10 years of practice with confidential workplace and career advice. So I generally work with a law grad for about 3 months. We have one-on-one training sessions where I get to know whatever the issue is that they're having, or just advice that they're seeking for their legal career, or whatever workplace issue they may be having, be it sexual harassment or discrimination. I help them with a lovely board of U of O grads who help me as well. There's about 10 lawyers who I can reach out to for support. So that's kind of another little hat I wear. And for a couple of years, I taught at University of Toronto, the Faculty of Law. I was the first year legal research and writing prof. So I shared my love of writing with the first year students and gave them a little tidbits on how to write persuasively and getting rid of the legalese, and how to write and not really sound like a lawyer. I think people go to law school and they think I have to use all these big words and hereafter and all these, fancy words, that Latin words that we don't necessarily need. So I would help teach that course. I'm not teaching it this year, but I taught it for 2 years. And that kind of leads to my blog, which is another thing I do on the side. Because of my love of writing, I started a blog on my personal website, Cowling Legal Freelance. I originally started it as a marketing tool, and I think a lot of legal professionals use blogs as a marketing tool to kind of get their SEO or search engine optimization for their websites up when you're using keywords. So I started it more focused on writing about case comments or interesting developments in the law. But then I realized I was kind of more interested in how certain legal issues that were affecting people in the legal profession, so whether it be women in law, equality seeking groups, interesting issues that have been coming up or interesting programs that went on that I attended. I would do a summary. And then in 2018, I started a blog series called Women Leading in Law. And that series really started, I think, I remember exactly where I was. I was at my desk and I read like the 100th article I've read about women leaving law. And it was like, why are women leaving law? And women are leaving law in droves. And it was just a lot of negative news about women leaving the legal profession. So I thought, why are we always focusing on women leaving law? Why don't we focus on women leading in law? And so I just quickly drafted up a blog post and said, I'm going to start this new series. Before I could change my mind, I put it live on my website and I said, send me your suggestions of women lawyers across the country who I can interview, and we can figure out all the cool stuff that they're doing and how they're succeeding in law and how they're doing that. What are some concrete steps we can take? So over the last 2 years, I've profiled about 72 women or lawyers who identify as women across Canada, doing a variety of different things with their legal degrees, whether it's being sole practitioners or law professors, or people who've started their own firms, or working in a large firm, or working for legal aid clinics. They're all doing amazing things with their career, and they were all, I love their honesty in their posts about the ups and downs of a legal career. So that's the other kind of life I have as a legal writer on the side.
All right, so let's go back to the University of Ottawa. Why did you choose to go to law school? What led you down that path?
Yeah, what led me down the path? It was, it's the typical story you hear from people who say their parents told them that they argue too much and that they would make an excellent lawyer. I kind of had that in the back of my mind. I never met another lawyer before I went to law school. I was the first person in my family to go to post-secondary school. I didn't know a lot about law other than what I saw on TV. All I knew was I loved going to school. I'd finished my 4-year degree of undergrad and I wanted to stay in school. And I did my undergrad in English literature with a minor in women's studies and religion. And I wasn't sure what I could really do with that degree. I didn't want to teach. So I thought about law, and then I was in the basement of my student housing in Kingston. I went to Queens, and I was moving some boxes around that a previous owner or previous tenant had left behind. And a book fell off the top shelf and hit me in the head. And it was actually the LSAT prep book. And I thought, well, this looks interesting. Maybe I'll try some LSAT questions. And I really enjoyed doing these weird logical puzzles. And I thought, well, if I can write the LSAT, maybe I can go to law school. So I tell people, like, literally law school kind of hit me on the head. And that's why I decided to go.
Now, after law school, and certainly you were sharing all of the things you're doing today, what led you to where you are today? Was it sort of designed that way you were going to do freelance lawyering? Was it a coincidence? Was it chance, or a combination of those things?
Yeah, I definitely didn't plan to be a freelance lawyer or an entrepreneur or start my own business. I think, like a lot of people who graduate from law school, you kind of have blinders on, and you can, at least for me, because I didn't really know anyone else in the legal profession, I thought, well, I have to become an associate, I have to become a partner, and then I'll, retire and stay at the same law firm. I didn't really know what else I could do with a law degree. So I kind of was very reactive in my career. I didn't really plan a lot of where I wanted to be or how I wanted to get there, which is kind of something that I wish people were a little more. If some people had given me that advice earlier on in my career, I just thought if I could put my head down and do great work, then my career will just, be great. But sometimes there's little hiccups that come along, and I experienced a few of those hiccups. And so I applied to Bay Street firms after my for second year of law school. And I basically did that only, I had no intention of applying. I didn't even know what Bay Street was. I didn't know what big, large law firms were. And just a friend of mine was like, why aren't you applying? You've got good grades. I'm like, I don't know, sure, whatever. So I just applied. And luckily, I got a job at McMillan Binch, which is now McMillan. It's a larger firm in Toronto. And I was accepted back to article there, and then I was hired back as an associate all the time, just like, okay, this is great, this is stuff happening to me in my career, I'll just say yes. And I was a corporate commercial litigator there for about 7 years. And I was one of the first bumps happened in my career when I returned from my second maternity leave. The firm had merged or taken over another large firm while I was away, and there was excess overhead. There was way too many lawyers, so a lot of people were let go, and I happened to be one of those lawyers. And I was a bit shocked. It's not fun to be let go from a job. It kind of hurts your ego a little bit. They were very clear. It's not because you're a bad lawyer or anything. It's purely a business decision. We need to let go people. And I was a seventh year associate without a book of business because I didn't really think I had to be proactive in my career and going out and getting clients and networking and business development. Because for me, the work kept coming from the partners. So I thought I'll just do great work and the work will keep coming. It doesn't really work that way. At some point, you kind of have to take control of your career and figure out how to get those files in and how to get those clients. And I didn't do that. So when I was let go, because I didn't have that network and I didn't have those connections, because I didn't really work on that early on in my career, I just jumped at the very first job opportunity that came my way because I panicked. I needed a job, and I accepted a job at an estate litigation boutique. And I realized very quickly on that I was not suited for estate litigation. Estate litigation is some people love it and there's thrive on doing that kind of law. It's a very emotional practice where there's brothers and sisters really fighting over their dead parents' money. And it's a lot of childhood anger and grievances. And I was not equipped to be a psychologist or a therapist every single day. And so I quit that job without another job lined up. When I got to the point, I just got to a breaking point. I was dreading going to work on Monday. I'd be walking to work going, oh, maybe I could get hit by a car, but not like hurt too much, just enough so I don't have to work today. Like it was not a good thing. You don't ever want to be in that place where you're hoping to get hit by a car. It's not healthy. So that was kind of like the, light bulb moment. I need to quit this job. It's not good for my mental health. It's not good for my legal career. And, but at the time I was also pregnant with my third child. And I thought, no one's going to hire a pregnant lady, even though we have laws in place in Canada where you can't discriminate against pregnant women. I just figured if I walk into a job interview with a big belly, no one's probably going to hire me. So instead of looking for a job right away, I was home with my kids for a little bit, but I needed something to do. I couldn't just sit at home and bake cookies. I needed some more intellectual stimulation. So I knew some friends at that point in my career. I was like an 8th year lawyer. I knew some friends who started their own law practices and were hanging up their shingles, and they just needed some help, but they didn't have the funds to hire an associate or bring on another partner to help them. So they would reach out to me and say, well, can you help me with this conference paper I have to write? Or can you help me with this factum? Or even simple, can you draft some blog posts for me so I can get some SEO and get some traffic to my website? And I said, sure, why not? I'm not really doing anything right now until my daughter's born. So I was picking up these projects here and there. And then I started to really enjoy what I was doing. And every time I went to look at jobs to apply to work full-time again at a law firm or in-house, I was looking at in-house positions, I would get this kind of icky feeling in my stomach going, oh, I don't really want to do that. And so I decided to kind of listen to that gut instinct. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to apply to these jobs because it's clearly not what I want. but I'm enjoying what I'm doing by picking up these projects here and there for lawyers and law firms. So I gave myself 1 year and I thought, if I can develop a practice that, as a freelance lawyer, that can make enough money to justify this as a career choice, then that's great. I'll give myself a year. If not, then I'll go back and apply to law firms. So I did my own website, put up a website, started blogging, printed off some business cards, went to every single networking event I could find. Obviously, this was pre-COVID, so this was all in-person cocktail parties, meeting every single lawyer I could meet to let them know what I did, what a freelance lawyer was. I hustled. I set a goal for myself of obtaining one new lawyer client a month, and I was able to hit that goal. So I was very busy, and I got busy pretty quickly. And then I started turning down work, and I thought, that's kind of stupid, turning down work when there's obviously a need. There's lawyers out there who need extra help now and again. And then there's probably lawyers like me who don't want to work full time or can't full time for some reason and want to pick up projects from lawyers and law firms. So in 2015, I started Flex Legal Network. And so we're a freelance lawyer company that matches busy law firms with freelance lawyers. And we started with 3 freelance lawyers, and now we're up to about 36, I think I last checked today, freelance lawyers, and 7 law clerks slash paralegals. And yeah, so we've helped hundreds of lawyers across Canada with their overflow legal work.
Now, with respect to the growth there from sort of the humble beginnings, is there any sort of period that you can trace as to what was responsible from going from just this thing you were going to try out for 1 year to having 36 lawyers and 7 law clerks and paralegals working for you?
Yeah, so I think it's getting out there and getting the name out there and building a personal brand and growing it that way. I think it there was a need, and I think just hustling and following up with everyone who I think would be a good client for Flex Legal. Um, I could have 100 lawyers tomorrow with my network, but I'm very freelance lawyers or law clerks, but I'm very particular about who I bring on. So I make sure that they're qualified and experienced. And so I think providing excellent work and referrals actually is a huge part of how Flex Legal has grown. And I think another reason why it's grown so much is lawyers are much more open to practicing in a different way. I think when I first started out, just me practicing, I had to do a lot of educating. What is a freelance lawyer? Does the Law Society allow you to do this? What about conflicts? Oh my God, confidentiality. And I'm like, well, I'm still a lawyer. I follow the rules of professional conduct. I have negligence insurance. I have everything you need. So explaining that and explaining how it worked, that took a long time. So once, freelancing wasn't born with Flex Legal. Like, there's been freelancers for a long time, especially in the UK and the US and Australia. There's many more freelance companies that are much farther along than ours. But I think in Canada, we're always maybe a slight step behind other countries when it comes to innovating and practicing in a different way. So I think over time, lawyers have become more open to the idea of freelancing, and yeah, I think that's just how we've grown. It's been great.
Now, with running your own business and the entrepreneurial spirit, it's a lot different than being a salaried employee as an associate. What can you perhaps share with my students who may be looking at starting their own practice, maybe not necessarily right out of becoming licensed, but perhaps one day, about perhaps budgeting, or 1 month you might see a huge growth of new clients. The next month there could be a pandemic and there's no litigation files going forward. So how do you sort of cope with those ups and downs, like a roller coaster there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just want to start by saying, if you have any kind of entrepreneurial itch, or you think you ever want to be your own boss, do it. It's amazing. Just having the control and just choosing what type of law you want to practice and choosing when you work. Like, I don't work any less than I did before when I was an employee, but I get to work when I want to work. If I want to take tomorrow off and I don't have any appointments, I can take tomorrow off, but that might mean I have to work a little bit on Saturday. There's so much freedom. So I would encourage anyone who's thinking of starting their own practice, if you feel like it's something that suits your personality, don't be afraid. It's something that can totally be done. Some words of wisdom. Yes, you have to plan more when you don't have that paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. It definitely ebbs and flows. You get really busy, you get lots of money, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, my bank account, that's not so good. And then it gets busy again. When that first happened, I would panic. I would panic and freak out and work extra hard trying to get out there and market. And then I would get so swamped, and then I would panic some more. How am I going to get this work done? And then I would panic. I was panicking all the time. And now, because I've had the practice for so long, I'm comfortable with those ups and downs. And so when it's a downtime, I actually take advantage of it now. So if there's a couple of weeks where things are a little slow, I take the couple weeks off. Like pre-pandemic, I would go to the movies in the afternoon. I would, sit and read a book because I didn't panic as much. I knew the work was going to keep coming. But I knew the work was going to keep coming because I kept putting in the work to business develop and network and plant the seeds. So that's something I think some entrepreneurs or some lawyers who start their own practice or paralegals, they don't continually put in the effort of trying to get new clients. They think, oh, I'm really busy now, I'll always be busy. No, not necessarily. So you kind of always have to be planting the seeds, even when you're busy. And planting the seeds can be as simple as networking with someone on LinkedIn or writing an article about the area of law you're practicing in, just something to constantly be marketing your services. So when there is a downtime, you've already put that work in place to attract those clients coming in the future. So with the ebbs and flows come the financial kind of ebbs and flows as well. So I think that the best plan is to look at your overhead or your expenses for the year and figure out how much you need to make in order to cover all of those expenses. And if you need to start frugally, then start, with a bare bones practice. Start working from home. Start a remote practice. I started with very little money. I didn't have a bunch of startup loans or anything I could do. So I learned how to do my own website. I learned how to use social media as a way to promote my practice, because that's free. It takes your time, but it's free. I learned how to use LinkedIn. I learned I used Vistaprint to print off my business cards and got out there, and I spent more of my time than my money in promoting my business. And then once the money starts coming in, then you can think and look at Google ads or what other like advertising in wherever your target client is. You can start looking at spending money that way. But it always helps to have a business plan as well. I didn't do one when I first started, but now every year, every January, I pull out the old business plan from the year before and see how much I did and how much I didn't do. But it's a good idea just to have kind of a rough idea of where you want your business to go. And so yeah, it's a great, some people aren't entrepreneurial, and that's okay too. Some people just prefer the paycheck every 2 weeks, and that's perfectly fine too. I think you just need to kind of look at yourself and think about whether you're a self-starter. Can you, are you okay working on your own? Are you okay with deadlines and moving things forward on your own? Or do you always need somebody to kind of instruct you? I think that's a good way to kind of look at whether you're entrepreneurial or not.
Now, you mentioned networking, and I think for a lot of my students, they kind of struggle with how to network, especially now in the COVID-19 era with Zoom coffees instead of in-person sort of coffee meetings. What advice can you have about making connections and feeling more comfortable reaching out to lawyers and senior paralegals about getting the experience that they may be wanting to get? Especially we have this whole sort of chicken and egg kind of analogy of people are looking for people with experience, but if you can't get the experience, then how do you make yourself more attractive to those kinds of places?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different things you can do. Work on getting your name out there in a positive way. So whether that's writing things and posting them on LinkedIn, or just engaging with people on LinkedIn or social media, or Instagram, Twitter. There's a whole law Twitter hashtag you can follow, and you don't have to be like every hour tweeting something about the law, but you really, if there's something you're known for, if you're passionate about one area of law and that's what you want to practice in, or if there's certain things that excite you, then it's a lot easier to kind of talk about those things. And so networking and business development, I don't want people to think of them as like dirty words that like, ew, you're schmoozing with people and you're trying to sell your services and hire me. That you're not, you're just really trying to get to know people and get some connections and maybe learn about them. And really, networking is a kind of a two-way street. You want to see if you can provide any help for the person you're networking with, just so that it's not all take from the people. So in COVID times, I really don't think it has changed too much when you're reaching out with a cold email saying, can I chat with you about your practice area and what's it like to be a paralegal, or what's it like to be a lawyer, and can we set up a quick Zoom call and have your coffee over Zoom. Previously it was, meet me at Starbucks, wherever, but I feel like now that COVID's here and we're all more comfortable or / getting tired of Zoom, people are more likely to say yes because they don't have to travel anywhere. They don't have to travel downtown to have a coffee with you. They can just, work on something and then the last minute switch over to Zoom and have a chat with you. So yeah, the cold emails are perfectly fine way. I would always suggest at the end of your Zoom call with whoever you're speaking with is maybe ask them, do you know anyone that would be a good fit for me to chat with? Because they are in the inn. They know what's going on. They're already in, they have an established practice. Maybe they've been practicing for a few years. So they would be able to say, well, actually, you know what, you should really talk to this person, or I know this person's really busy, so they probably won't get a chance to talk to you, but maybe look at their website and read their articles. There's also some good virtual networking events that are going on. If you look up any kind of association, a lot of people are trying to move their in-person networking cocktails to online, some more successfully than others. I did do a quiz night with one association, and they paired us off into little groups of 4 or 5 people, and I got to actually chat and get to know those people before we joined the big group and answered our trivia questions. And I think if you do any online virtual networking, treat it just like it's an in-person networking event, and follow up with anybody that you actually met. So if you met them in the chat function, or you met them chatting in a breakout session, or even just in the group, it's a good idea to try and connect with them on LinkedIn, or just follow up with an email saying, I met you last night at the networking event. It'd be great to connect. Or it sounds like you have a really interesting practice. If you have a few moments to spare, can we have a chat? I find most, like 90% of the people I know are more than happy to give back to junior legal professionals who are just looking for a little bit of help, because it's really hard, especially with COVID and the climate for hiring. It's not the best right now. So I think we're trying to do our best to give back and help any way we can. So even if we can have a 20-minute phone call with you to try and give some pointers or review your CV or resume or whatever it is that you may need help with, most people will say yes. With the reaching out, I would just say, don't stalk people. If you email and you don't get a response, I would follow up probably one more time, just in case the email went to spam, or maybe they just got too busy and they forgot to respond. There's no harm in following up. It's just if you follow up like 5, 6, 7, 8 times, they might get a little annoyed with you. But definitely be proactive and reach out. I know it's hard when you're a little shy, but like, what's the worst thing that can happen? They say no. So what? You move on to the next person. They're not going to think any less of you because they asked you. you ask them for a Zoom phone call.
Now, you mentioned COVID-19 in that context, but how does that affect freelance work, given that a lot of the courts are kind of on reduced, only the urgent cases are going forward in some cases, and some others, they're just on hiatus, I think, till January. How do you adapt to that situation? How does the team there adapt with all these changes?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this question kind of in two parts. So first of all, our actual practice hasn't really changed at all because of COVID. We've been working remotely since we started, and since I started 7 years ago, and then Flex 5 years ago. So the actual practice itself is the same. This is kind of old news to us. Nothing really changed for us come March, when everyone was like, oh my God, I have to work from home. That's what we've been doing all along. So we were up on the technology, we were up on the Zoom and how to share documents remotely. We were all fine with that. I think because our practice is 80% litigation based, March, April, May, I can definitely say were the slowest months we ever had at Flex Legal. And it was a little scary at first, I think, because the law firms didn't know what was going to go on. They didn't know if the work was going to come in. So they just stopped outsourcing work. They kind of let people go. They let the juniors go. They let maybe law clerks go or their paralegals go. And but this last quarter, so July, August, September, it was our best quarter ever. We actually did really well because there was a huge need for freelance law clerks, was huge, and freelance lawyers. It was starting to come back again. And I think that's because COVID scared some law firms and they did let people go. They're not quite ready to hire full-time people on again. So they see freelance lawyers and freelance law clerks as a flexible way and a more cost-effective way to get the work done without them having to do it themselves. So they can just hire us and hire our law clerks for that one project, and they don't have the overhead of having that full-time employee. It's still slow in some areas. Employment law has always been busy. Real estate law clerks, our law clerks helping with real estate deals has been really busy lately. I think because a lot of people are buying houses because they know we're going to be in the houses for a while and they want to be somewhere that they're happy. So they're either buying houses or condos and they're upsizing, or they're leaving cities. A lot of people are leaving Toronto and moving to small towns because they can work remotely now and their money goes a lot further outside of Toronto. So law clerks has been busy. A little bit of our corporate stuff has been busy, but the general civil litigation has slowed down quite a bit because, like you're saying, unless it's urgent, a lot of the stuff has kind of been pushed off. But going forward, I don't see COVID changing too much how we practice here as freelance lawyers. I think maybe different areas of law might get busier, like bankruptcy litigation. Maybe we'll see. Hopefully, once everyone gets the courts fully open again, either online or in person, we're going to get a lot busier with the litigation, as general litigation as well. Family law has been pretty steady too. I think perhaps maybe, unfortunately, there might be some COVID divorces coming up, but we'll see. That's always a busy area of law.
Now, right now, my students are learning, incidentally enough, legal research and writing and legal communication. And certainly I love when, coincidentally, the guests talk about exactly what we're covering in class. And you mentioned about things like the plain language movement. So perhaps harking back to your days there at U of T, do you have any lessons you can quickly share about the art of communication and legal communication and writing that my students can really benefit from?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is, who are you writing for? Because you're not always writing for the same person. If you're writing a letter to the client, you have to put yourself into the client's shoes. What would they understand as someone who's not legally trained? If you're writing for a judge or you're writing for another lawyer, they're going to understand the law a little bit more. So you can maybe use some terminology that your client might not know. But always put yourself into their shoes and read whatever it is you've written as if you're that person. And are you going to understand? Because it's hard. We get caught up. We know the file. We know all the ins and outs and everything. So you constantly kind of write it from your own perspective. So I think the first thing to do is always put yourself in the shoes of who you're writing for. Second, I would say, depending on what it is that you're writing, whether it's a client reporting letter or a much larger like factum, leave yourself time to edit. I think most of the legal writing happens when you're editing. And I know it's easier said than done when we're all busy and you've got a deadline, you have to get that statement of claim in or that defense. But if you can give yourself if you can finish it a day early and then give yourself that extra day to sleep on it so you can actually edit it. And by editing it, I think some people think it just means checking for spelling errors or things like that. But there's a whole process you kind of need to do when you're doing written advocacy. And I think the first thing is to edit big picture. And so you want to look at, what is it that you're actually trying to say? Am I actually saying it? Because sometimes you start writing and then you get into the weeds and you forget about what the big picture is. What are you asking the judge to do? Or what are you asking the tribunal to do? Are you asking them to evict this tenant? What is the big picture? And is that clear? And then you kind of edit, you narrow it down. So have you told that story? Have you asked that ask? Are you clear in that ask? Have you, and then the next step I do normally do like a paragraph by paragraph. Does this paragraph make sense? Am I writing in a point first writing? Like, am I up front saying what this paragraph actually is going to say? Like, it's not a mystery novel. You're not leaving the whodunit at the very end. You say this tenant needs to be evicted because they didn't pay rent. Like, don't leave that to the end. That's important for the adjudicator to understand. And then once you get the paragraphs kind of figured out, I like to use headings. Headings help you tell a story as well. If you can just read your headings and they tell you exactly what you need to do, you've done your job. Keep them short, keep them simple. A lot of clean space on the written work also helps because it's easier on the eyes for the person who's reading it. And so then after the paragraphs, I kind of that's when I get down to the nitty gritty and the sentence. Does this sentence make sense? The grammar, the punctuation. And then I like to let it sit for a little bit. And then I do one final check for spelling mistakes. And there's always one thing that, you miss because you've read it 100 million times and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I used the wrong there in that sentence. And you always find it after you've submitted it or served it on the other side or given it to the judge. And that's always frustrating, but just know even the best legal writers out there do that too, because it's just something you sometimes can't see. If you can, have a fellow student or have a fellow paralegal read it too, to make sure they are reading what you think you're telling them. And like I said earlier, try and get rid of the legalese, use plain language. I don't some contracts I read, oh my God, they start with, all men know by thy presence here. What? I don't even know what it means. First of all men, and then thy presence. What is this? Christmas, we're giving presents to people? I don't understand where this old archaic language comes from, right? So I think I looked it up and I think it means this is a legally binding contract or something like that. And I'm like, just use that word instead. I think people use big fancy words because it makes them feel like they know more stuff or they're more intelligent. But I think the best legal writers out there and the smartest legal writers are the ones who write in plain language and they persuade the judge and they persuade the adjudicator by using simple, concise, clear paragraphs and sentences. It's just the best way to go.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I mean, I might as well cancel my class today because you just covered everything there for me. Students always joke that when are you actually, I mean, you're almost like the guest speaker for our class. We hear from you so little, but thank you for that. Really helpful. And I hope they picked up on that. And it's not just me harping on the same things there. Now with communication, I think it's also a good segue here. How is it like when your clients are law firms and lawyers as opposed to sort of the direct clients when you have private clients, right? How is that in terms of communicating to them? And I know lawyers and paralegals have, we have our own little language that we communicate with each other with. How do you find dealing with clients that are law firms and lawyers like?
Yeah, I love working with lawyers and law firms as clients. In my previous life, when I worked with end clients, a lot of what I had to do was kind of distill down what their legal problem was, because they would come into my office and they'd sit down and they'd talk for an hour about this neighbor and this cat and this fence. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do. And then at the very end of the conversation, they might say, oh, by the way, their fence is on my property by 3 feet. And it's like, oh, so that's the legal issue. It's not because the cat was in your tree or something. It was, this is it. So when you're working with people who aren't trained legally, a lot of the time you're like a detective trying to figure out, is there a cause of action? What is the legal issue? Can you actually help them? Or do they need to go to somebody else, the municipality or something? Working with lawyers and law firms, they get it. And I don't waste an hour of my time trying to figure out the legal issue. They give it to you all wrapped up in a little box saying, here's the legal issue. I need you to research X, go do that and write me a memo. Or I need you to draft a motion for Y, go do that. And I just, it's very refreshing for me and I really enjoy it.
Now, looking back at all the different things you've done, what do you feel is the most significant accomplishment in your legal career, and what are you most proud of?
Yeah, I think I have to say growing Flex Legal and starting that company. I'm really happy I did that. I feel like part of my philosophy in life is like life's too short and you don't ever want to be stuck in a job that you hate or is killing you slowly, or you want to jump in front of a car. It's a bad place to be. And I feel like a lot of people, if they're unhappy with being a lawyer, they feel like it's either law or getting out of the legal profession. And by starting Flex Legal, I've been able to help some people realize that there's other ways to practice and ways that suit them and their personalities and how they want to live life. This way they mold the practice to suit them as opposed to changing themselves to suit the legal profession. And I think growing it and helping people find these freelance jobs, it's been very satisfying. And I think another thing, I guess my Women Leading in Law blog has also been very, I'm very happy I started that. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say how much these blog posts mean to them and giving them advice on what they can do with their legal career and giving them kind of an insight that, sometimes lawyers put up this facade that everything's great, I'm very successful and I've never had anything bad happen. And then you can read these blog posts and learn, some people lost their job, they were let go, or some people, they never got a job, they never got an articling position for the longest time, or they had a divorce in their 10th year of practice and it threw their whole legal career off, or things like that. And it humanizes lawyers a little bit more. So I'm glad I was able to put that series together and actually help people realize all the different things you can do with a law degree.
Now, continuing on the questions that you pose in your series there, what are some of the key challenges for women, and more importantly, what are the key opportunities for them in law?
Yeah, and I kind of pose that question to be directly at whoever the woman is who's answering this question. For me, I would have to answer it as a white woman, but a Black woman working in a small town would have different challenges and different experiences than I would. But for me, the biggest challenge was dealing with, I guess, my colleagues and people above me at the large law firm. When I started having children, they automatically kind of thought I wasn't interested in being a lawyer anymore. I wasn't as dedicated. And that is really frustrating when people assume things about you that aren't true. There are some people who have children, they decide to leave the law because they want to spend their time at home while their children are young. And there's others who are more than happy to stay in law and work the hours if they have supportive partners at home or supportive family. It's totally doable. It doesn't make you any less of a parent or any less of a lawyer just because you have children. And I think that assumption can be made about, people make that assumption about all women lawyers, whether or not they decide to have children. They just kind of look at women in that childbearing age and think, uh-oh, she's going to leave on maternity leave. And I think the way we can help that, and on the positive side, I can see our male colleagues are stepping up and talking about being parents, and they're the ones coming and picking the kids up from school and saying, I have to leave early to go to my kids' soccer practice. And I think the more open men are about their positive parenting, then that it's going to take away from the stigma that women have once we have children. And I think it's changing. I think there's much more open-minded people out there, but I think it's important for people to not assume things about other people and to ask first. So if I've seen in the past some women lawyers haven't been asked to travel on a file because they just assume she doesn't want to travel because she has kids. Well, I can tell you, I would have loved to have traveled a night in a hotel away from my kids. That would be amazing. But like, no, they just assume that you don't want to do that. So ask first. And if she doesn't want to do it, then don't do it. So for opportunities, I think the sky is the limit. I think what's really exciting for me is in the last couple of years, I've seen so many women start up their own law firms. And it's so exciting and so encouraging to see that, because I think until the people in power are the ones who are making the decisions, and at these large law firms, we haven't reached gender parity. It's so in order to we haven't reached parity on anything other than like race either. But in order to have the power, if you start up your own law firm, you can dictate how things are going. And so now the power is now in your hands. So to see women out there starting their own firms and starting firms in different ways and virtually or in person, it's exciting to see that.
Now, what advice do you have for my students, my female students in particular, women, as they embark on a career in law? And certainly you touched on things about balancing children and work, that some of them already have children, and I may be wondering exactly that. Will I be seen any differently? Or what if I do want to have kids one day? How will that impact certainly at paralegal firms or law firms? So what advice can you offer for them?
Yeah, I think surround yourself with mentors who've done it before, and they can definitely give you some advice on how to return from maternity leave or how to balance things. But I think it's important to figure out what you want to do. Like, do you want to still work full time? Do you want to work part time? And then figure out how to actually manage that with your family situation. I think it's a very individual thing. But it's easier to do this when you have people to fall back on. If you had a really crappy day, you can call that person down the hall or someone you've met on LinkedIn who's been through this. There's a lot of great women lawyer. I'm sure there's women paralegal groups on Facebook too, where you can chat to about maybe like a discrimination issue has come up at work, and you just need some advice. I think starting out as a new legal professional, for no matter what gender, I think some tips I would give is, and I think I kind of alluded to them earlier, is to be proactive in your legal career and not just reactive. Kind of have a big picture of where you want to be. I'm not saying you have to map out exactly, in 2 years I want to be here, in 5 years here. Just kind of have a general idea, like, do you eventually want to have your own practice? What's that practice going to look like? Do you want to work in-house somewhere? What does that in-house position look like? Just kind of have an idea, and then think about how you can sow the seeds to grow that opportunity. So if you want to practice in a certain area, maybe start reaching out to paralegals who do that and figure out, how do they get their clients? Where do they, maybe they can give you some advice on that. And so start thinking about that now, and getting out there and making connections, I think really helps. And I don't mean like you don't have to be out there every day pounding the pavement. Like you're still new to all of this. It can be as simple as joining Twitter and following a couple of people that you admire, or it could be simply drafting or writing a quick little article on LinkedIn about maybe an exciting case came out, or you've learned some great, written advocacy tips that you want to pass on. You can write that. And so just one little thing here and there, instead of just, burying your head in the work and not focusing on your career at all.
So it's great. I think a couple of students had questions relating to networking there, and I think you've probably answered that right there with some other tips for them. I just wanted to check in if there's any other questions from any of the students. Either pop it into the chat here, or if you feel confident, certainly unmute yourself and ask. I think Bryce has a question.
I try and always have at least one question to sort of get my money's worth out of this entire course. But in any case, so I'm hearing a lot about networking, and I'm hearing a lot about, chicken and the egg syndrome and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious. I was wondering about, this is kind of like what my plan I think is going to be. And what I'm envisioning is, and I want to know if this is a good idea or something that's common that you've heard of, is starting off as, just a schmo handling some office paper. Because I worked 16 years as a fine dining waiter, right? So I'm comfortable with talking to people, but actually being in an office and doing office work hasn't happened. Even when I was a realtor for 2 years, didn't really happen. So I know I need to do that. That's going to happen. And I'm going to try and obviously work that into with my internship. But that's, everybody does that. So that's kind of whatever. But my next question is should I feel down if the only thing I can seem to sink my fingernails into is the same kind of work that's sort of ancillary to the legal process, and maybe getting a little bit more of like touching stuff, like being like hands on paper? I can say I was part of that, but I didn't write it, or I helped edit that, but I didn't do it, that kind of thing. Or should I, because I can just snap my fingers and go back to the restaurant in a second and do that like 3 days a week. Should I do that and then continue looking, or should I, you know what I mean? Like this was going through my head even before I'm passing the course. So
yeah. No, and I get that question a lot from some of the people I do career counseling for through my U of Ottawa role, is especially with the lawyers. They're like, well, I was offered this job. It's not really a lawyer job, but I get to do legal work and I get to be in there. And I said, if you're learning something and it's something in the legal profession, like it's similar to what you will eventually be doing, and you'll be able to take away something from that job, I say go for it. And don't think because it doesn't have the title you want that it's any less than a good job for you to do in order to get that experience. I think early on in your career, it's important to kind of put yourself out there and get as much experience as possible. And then when that opens other opportunities, then you can be a little more choosy in the type of work you take on. But I think if you can get something even in the legal realm at all, I say jump at that opportunity.
yeah, like once I actually have a leg or a foot in the door, I can actually say I'm ready for something.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Bryce, for your questions. Does anyone else have any questions here? Perfect. So thank you so much, Erin, for joining us here today. And certainly, yeah, thank you for answering those same 6 questions that you pose yourself. I think it's great for those students who are particularly inspired by all your content, that they get a glimpse of well, who's behind all of that, and learn more about you that way as well. So perhaps you could end with maybe how they can connect with you on your various platforms, as well as any final words of wisdom that you can impart with them. And thanks again so much for joining.
Yeah, I would love to connect with everyone. The best way is probably on LinkedIn, and then just message me or just connect with me. And then if you want my email, I can give it to you on there, but I'm the only Erin Cowling, I think, that's a lawyer, so it's not too hard to find me. And yeah, I guess my words of advice is just, you can do it. It's going to be discouraging at first when you're out there as a newbie. And I remember what it was like, where you feel like you don't know anything and you're never going to learn, and you make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I made really stupid mistakes when I started, and it gets better. You have to make those mistakes. You have to just keep trying, and then you'll just kind of grow into your paralegal practice, and it'll be so much better. But so just you can do it. I think it'll be great.
Perfect. Thanks again, and all the best with all that you're doing there. And thanks to all the students for tuning in and listening today.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you, Erin.
Okay. Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.